Thanks for joining us. This is Matt Grohl, Vista Homes. Excited to be with you again today. Today we're going to talk about flatwork. Flatwork is essentially what we call concrete that's poured and finished off in a flat way. So one general rule that I learned years ago from an old timer, he said there's two things about concrete everyone should know. One, no one is ever going to steal it. And two, concrete always cracks. So as much as we don't want to hear that, we have to be aware of concrete, its pros and cons. Pros are it can last forever, right? If it's laid and installed properly, it's a fantastic material, completely revolutionized the world, concrete. So we want to just make sure we lay it properly. There's a lot of things you should consider when laying concrete. For ensure proper compaction, the material we're putting on is appropriate. We want to make sure there's a bed of gravel. We want to make sure, if possible, we can reinforce it, both what it's attaching to and within itself. We want to make sure there's break lines appropriately placed in the slab, and additives if needed. You can add fiber to help reinforce it, and also make sure we're pouring in the proper environmental conditions. So one of the challenges we have is pouring in the middle of winter, very difficult. So let's talk about compaction real quick. We've talked about this in previous videos. For example, if we're pouring a sidewalk, we want to make sure the ground below it is compacted. So when we backfill your home, we make sure we know exactly where the sidewalks are, and the excavators will compact those areas so it's ready for concrete, and all we have to do is put down gravel and pour. So there's a lot of forethought in considering that. So just as a reminder, virgin soil is about 97 to 98% compacted. We need to have at least that level, and mechanically compaction can take you up to about 98, 99%, so it's very sufficient. We just need to make sure we do it appropriately. And as I mentioned earlier, rebar is very important, so we want to make sure if we're like doing some steps coming off a front porch, we rebar that very heavily so that front step does not fall, crack, or lift off. So that you see that a lot, right? You walk up to a house and you see a front step just tilted off. That's just inadequate reinforcement and not proper compaction. So super important to do that. Now break lines. So what you see is like in a garage or a driveway, you see all those lines. They're purposely placed there so that when that slab, like it says, will crack, that it cracks and cracks on that line. So it doesn't crack in front of the, across in a big diagonal across the whole thing and make it look really ugly. So those break lines are very important. So there's two ways you can do a break line. You can saw cut it in, or you can actually trowel it in. It's really a preference of what you think is best. Typically our garages will saw cut, so it's a smoother transition. So when you're walking across that with your feet, you're not catching those edges. Outside we can do both out in the driveway. We typically don't do any cuts in the basement, mainly because we know it'll crack a little bit anyways and it's going to be covered. So that will we hope it doesn't crack, but sometimes we don't cut it just to see if it doesn't, and if it does, you're going to cover it anyway. So it can be cut if you'd like. We don't see that very often. And I talked before about additives. There's a lot of additives you can put in concrete to help them to pour in a better condition, set up better, and reinforce better. So they definitely cost money, but there's definitely things you can do there. Pour in proper temperature. That's a challenge we have living in Utah, is that the weather is tough, right? We get a lot of adverse weather conditions, so pouring in the winter can be very difficult. So if we do pour in adverse temperatures, we will blanket and potentially even heat the ground before we pour. You will see potentially when we pour and we put blankets on that it leaves some discolorations. With time, those go away. I'd say within 1 to 2 years, those discolorations will go away and fade away as the concrete naturally turns that white look that you see with older concrete. Anyway, so that's flat work. Again, a lot of things you can do. You could color it, you could stain it, you can stamp it, whole variety of things. We're happy to do that. Our flat work guys are phenomenal. We've found 1 or 2 guys right now that are we've never had a problem with them. They just do fantastic work. So one thing to consider too is when we're building a house, we have to dispose of concrete. We have to, when they're done pouring the concrete, they have to clean out their machines and they have to clean out into place. Historically, you would just dump it on the neighbor's lot and drive away, right? And that's not good, proper etiquette. As well as it's not just etiquette, it's an issue with downstream pollutants. And so by state law, we have to have a collection bin at every job site that people can wash out their pump trucks and their trucks. And so that's a fee we have to put onto the build process. and you'll see that in concrete washouts is the name of that one. Pumps. So we have to, because these houses are getting so big nowadays and there's such a long reach, and we're often pouring on adverse hilly areas, we have to pump. What that means is we have a big pump truck that pumps the concrete up and over down to where it needs to go. So typically we have 3 pump times in a house: footings, foundation, and flat work in the basement garage. That's where we just have to have a pump. That's part of the budget that we put together. And also, if you have a porch that's like way in the back, or you're on a really steep lot, we will have to get another pump truck. So it's just a necessary evil to do what we have to do. So anyway, flat work, super exciting stuff. We do our best to get the best flat work we can. Often there's challenges, and so we want to do the best we can to get the right subcontractors, support in the right conditions, and prepare it appropriately. So anyways, that's flat work. Thanks for joining us. See you next week.